Hey guys, welcome back. Today we want to talk about the 6 basic principles of the Constitution, and these are 6 really important foundational ideas upon which our Constitution was created. So let's get to it. The first basic principle that we want to look at is popular sovereignty. Now, I know you've heard the word popular before. Popular often means that people know you, people like you sometimes. Sovereignty typically means that you have the authority or you're in charge or you have the power in a given situation. Popular is also a form of the word population, which we know means people. So popular sovereignty as a basic principle is the idea that the people hold the governing power, that we make decisions that affect our government. And we do that by voting for congressmen, voting for the president, voting in elections and things like that. That's how we exercise popular sovereignty. Moving on then to federalism. Now, in our last chapter, we talked about federalism or the federal system as a system of government in which power is divided between a national government and many regional governments. And that's exactly what federalism is. And as one of the basic principles of the Constitution, federalism, basically, the goal of it is to ensure that we have the people's views being represented well. Okay, so if you can think back to the Anti-Federalist and Federalist discussion, we said that the Anti-Federalists felt that the states were a better representation of what the people wanted and what the people needed. So that kind of goes along with that concept of federalism, that we want to make sure that there is a governing body that can represent the people's wishes well, but also govern effectively. And if you remind me in class, I'll do my federalism rap, so it'll help you remember. Separation of powers is easy to remember. We talked about this last chapter as well. Separation of powers is that idea that we separate powers of government, like you see here in this image, so that no one person gets too much power. So in our government, we have 3 different branches. It doesn't always have to be like that, but that's just how our government is set up. We have the legislative branch, which is Congress, and they make laws. We have the executive branch, which is the president, vice president, and Congress, and they enforce laws. And then we have the judicial branch, which is the Supreme Court, and their job is to interpret and apply the laws. Going along with separation of powers is checks and balances. Checks and balances, which we'll read about in one of the Federalist papers. I know you're excited about that. Checks and balances basically says that each branch has responsibilities in the other branches to ensure that no one person gets too much power, and also to ensure that everyone is doing their job. Okay, so we'll talk about some checks and balances in class, but basically, for example, if Congress passes a law, that law, or Congress passes a bill, that bill cannot become a law unless it is signed by the president. If the president doesn't like a bill, he can veto that. If Congress doesn't like the president's veto, they can override his veto. If the Supreme Court doesn't think that a law passed by Congress is constitutional, then the Supreme Court can strike it down. So there's lots of different examples of how each branch has responsibilities in other branches in order to maintain that balance. And next, we have the concept of limited government. That's another familiar term, I hope. Limited government is that concept that the government is limited in its authority. There are certain things that the government can't do. And the government is limited in the United States by the Constitution. So the Constitution lines out what, for example, the president can do. It also says that if the president does this one thing that's wrong, then he can face impeachment. Members of Congress can be impeached. The Supreme Court members can be impeached. So basically, limited government, our government in the United States, is limited by the Constitution. And last but not least is judicial review. Judicial review is a very important concept that I want you to remember. It is most likely going to be on your EOC, so please make sure that you remember it. Judicial review, and it's a lengthy definition, so get ready. The federal courts can determine the constitutionality of acts of Congress or the president. The federal courts can determine the constitutionality of acts of Congress or the president. And this was established by a very important court case known as Marbury versus Madison. Okay? So we're going to come back and talk about Marbury v. Madison. That's a whole nother video in itself. But just know that these 6 basic principles, these 6 foundational ideas, upon which our Constitution was founded are extremely important, and we're going to apply these principles in class with our discussion and activities. So if you have any questions, let me know. Make sure that you're taking notes on your Google Doc and that you've completed the questions that go along with this through Edpuzzle. See ya!